Good Monday morning. Sorry, I never have a clue what day it is. I'm grading stuff from yesterday and making videos for tomorrow. So yeah, I decided to just sit at my kitchen table and make this video where I was trying to do everything. I don't know how many videos I'm going to make this week, but just kind of looking. Actually, I'm going to probably just make my lesson plans as I am making this video. So today's Monday. You will do Simple Solutions 67. Tomorrow you will do Simple Solutions 68 and have a Simple Solutions quiz. Wednesday, Simple Solutions. Wednesday, I'm going to give you double Simple Solutions. So Wednesday, you'll do Simple Solutions 69 and 70 and check them both, because on Thursday, you will have an open book test. It would be tight squeezed to get the test study guide finished and checked and the test taken on Thursday. And as I'm telling in the email I sent yesterday, and as I've said in literature quizzes, if this was a normal school year, Friday we would do a Bible lesson, and then after Bible, history, whatever, we would go upstairs and we would have breakfast, which would take a long time because it's a big breakfast and let you all sit around and talk and whatever, and then we would do movies, and we would not be doing regular class stuff. And they're just a Friday on trying to squeeze in a test on that. No. So, we're going to make Friday as normal as possible. I normally wear my PJs on the last day before Christmas break, and it's PJ day. I'll probably wear my PJs all day Friday until I actually have to go out in public. And I will just sit around and grade everything that you have turned in up to Thursday, and if I have to, start emailing, hunting down missing assignments. Hopefully that won't happen. So trying to get everything done by Thursday for you all. Doesn't mean I'm not working Friday. I'm just working grading. So we have gone through we ended on Friday with the Elizabethan age, talking about Queen Elizabeth. They talked about how wonderful, what a good queen she was. Then she was in the line of the Tudor dynasty. Tudor dynasty ends, and now we're in the 1600s with King James. The Tudors were some of the strongest rulers in English history. They claimed to be absolute rulers, having no responsibility to Parliament or anybody else for their decisions, which actually is not true, because they had to use Parliament to get countries' consent for new laws and taxes. When Elizabeth I, the last of the Tudors, died without an heir, it was decided that King James VI of Scotland, the only son of Mary, Queen of Scots, would unite the crowns of Scotland and England as James I, the first Stuart monarch of England. James had very definite ideas about the divine right of kings. As it is atheism and blasphemy to dispute what God can do, he said, so is high content in a subject to dispute what a king can do. In other words, he's saying, God said I should be king, so I should be king. He does not like Parliament at all. He thinks he should have all control. And he doesn't hide the fact that he does not like Parliament. Because Parliament was a representative assembly, a variety of opinions were expressed there. To a king who only cared for his opinion, meetings of Parliament were just craziness. But he had no choice but to deal with them. He wanted to spend freely to maintain a large and lavish court, so he kept having to go back to Parliament and beg for money. James also came into conflict with English courts of law. Shortly after his arrival in England, he displayed his ignorance of England's traditional law by ordering a thief to be hanged without trial. This goes all the way back to the Magna Carta in the 1200s. That's not allowed. That's a huge no-no. And so I'm not going to read this. You can read this yourself. But the point being, he's got some serious issues going on here. He does not like Parliament. He doesn't believe in Parliament. So he's going to be in a lot of agreements with Parliament. He thought that he should be in control, that God had ordained it. He thought he should be the head of the Church of England. as well as the King of England, and unless he could control both, his divine right would be limited. He knew that if he admitted any limitation, he would have to admit more limitations. He could tell that religious, political freedom go hand in hand. Even though England had broken its ties with the Roman Church, it still remained very much like the Roman Church. There was still a lot of parts of the Roman Catholic Church that was kept in there. Because remember, the king that broke with the Catholic Church was King Henry VIII. And remember, King Henry VIII only broke with the Catholic Church because they wouldn't let him divorce his wife. He was still very much Catholic, and so they kept a lot of the Catholic things in the church. And all the way through, with all the different kings who were Protestant, or, Mary, who was Catholic, or Elizabeth, who probably didn't really have any religion, it still stayed that way, that the Church of England still had a lot of Catholic beliefs tied into it. And now we're back to a king who says he's the king of the church and he's king of England. He's the head of both of them. And as such, he's keeping that system of a Protestant church with a lot of Catholic stuff in it. And so now we get to the Puritans. So now we're getting to the 1600s and the part of English history that is connected to our American history. And so hopefully it's more interesting and stuff that maybe you have heard of. So we get to the Puritans, who wanted to purify the church. They wanted to purify it of all the Catholic stuff that they thought was unbiblical that was left in the church. Then you have the separatists, who just want to separate from the church. James versus the Puritans. Like I said, I'm skipping around, throwing in some extra stuff, pointing out some stuff. Your job is to actually read word for word all of it. But I'm skipping to James versus the Puritans. There had been an attempt under Elizabeth to suppress the Puritans, but by the early 17th century, remember 17th century would be 1600s, the Puritans were stronger than ever. It was during the reign of James I that one group of separatists, the Pilgrims, first sailed to Holland and then on to America. The king subjected the Puritans to even greater representation than ever before, vowing to harry them out of the land, to get rid of them. James did agree with the Puritans on one issue. They need a new Bible, which is where you get the King James Version of the Bible in 1611. That's one of those dates that I expect you to remember. It's also one of those dates you're going to have to know for 8th grade Bible. 1611, King James Version of the Bible. James found it nearly impossible to work with a parliament, increasingly protective of its traditional rights and increasingly dominated by Puritans. Because Parliament continually refused to provide the money James wanted, the exasperated king dissolved the assembly in 1610. Except for a short, confusing session called in 1614, it didn't meet for 11 years. After James had used every device he could think of to get money, he had no choice but to call Parliament back in 1621. But then he got rid of Parliament again. But by then England was at war with Spain and Charles needed money. So once again, we see this happening. They want to get rid of Parliament, but then they need money, so they got to call Parliament back. So that's King James. King James dies. Charles I becomes king. And Charles I didn't like Parliament either. But it's the same thing. He has forced to call Parliament so he can get money. The country was in an uproar. The new elected Parliament shared the sentiment of the English people. So things keep going with Charles. All kinds of problems, conflicts between Charles and the Parliament. Petition of Right. In 1628, Parliament, the legal representative of the people of England, drew up the Petition of Right, and Charles, though evasive at first, grudgingly assented. The petition stated nothing new. It merely reaffirmed the liberties and rights which Englishmen had won in the past. But now custom and tradition were embodied in a formal declaration, written down officially for all to read. The Petition of Right should have ended the struggle between king and parliament, but instead it simply marked the beginning of a greater conflict. Charles had no intention of respecting it. In his opinion, there was nothing, no law, not even the petition of right, that he did not have the prerogative or the ability to override. On the other hand, this Declaration of Rights made Parliament even more aware of the principles of English liberty. So just basically, things just keep ramping up. The tension between Parliament and King just keep ramping up. Puritans are increasingly dominant in Parliament. They were still determined to purify the church. However, they weren't defending religious freedom for everybody in the same way that Parliament was defending everyone's rights. Then you end up with the 11 Years' Tyranny. Charles dissolved Parliament in 1629. Defying the trends of English traditions, Charles openly proclaimed that he would rule England without Parliament or the people's consent. Thus began the 11 years that stand out in English history as the 11 Years' Tyranny. During this time, the government of England was changed from a government by monarchs, lords, and commons to what was in effect an absolute and irrepressible monarchy, like that of France or Spain. Under Charles I, the Puritans suffered severe persecution, including imprisonment, branding on the cheek, and other abuses. Many Puritans left England at this time, and some of them came to America. But many stayed, embittered but increasingly determined to deal with their tyrannical king, which leads to the English Civil War, which is what we will talk about tomorrow. So homework for today, do Simple Solutions 67, check it, and read 15.6. See you tomorrow.